The ringing of my phone interrupted the hum of the jet engines as I settled into my seat on a red-eye flight for a business trip. I glanced at the screen and saw Olivia's name, my wife of 10 years. It was unusual for her to call me at this hour, especially since our conversations had become increasingly brief and transactional. I pressed the accept button, bracing for whatever had compelled her to call. Charles, her voice was calm, almost cheerful. I wanted to let you know I've made a decision. A decision? Her tone suggested something more significant than choosing between red or white wine for dinner. I'm getting married, she continued. To my boss, Ethan. We've been seeing each other for a while now. It's serious. I froze, my grip tightening on the phone. She didn't stop. I've already sold the house, she added, her voice unervingly matter-of-fact. Everything is finalized. I've moved my things out. You'll need to find somewhere else to stay when you get back. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. A strange calmness washed over me, a reflexive defense against the enormity of her words. My mind scrambled for a response, but instead of anger or despair, I found myself replying simply, "All right." She hesitated, clearly expecting a different reaction. "All right? Is that all you're going to say?" "Yes," I said. "All right." I ended the call and leaned back in my seat, staring out the window at the city lights below. My calm demeanor was a mask for the storm brewing inside me, but one thing became clear. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a plan. By the time the plane touched down, I had already started piecing things together. Olivia's announcement didn't blindside me as much as it should have. Over the past year, there had been signs, late nights at work, evasive answers, and a growing emotional distance between us. Ethan's name had come up far too often in her conversations. But selling the house? That was a move I hadn't anticipated. Still, I couldn't let her actions dictate my next steps. The house was a crucial piece of the puzzle, one I had safeguarded against just such an eventuality. I smiled faintly, knowing she had underestimated me. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "Jeff, I need you to confirm something for me," I said, my voice steady. "Of course, Charles," he replied. "What's going on?" "Olivia claims she sold the house," I explained. "But as you know, the property is in my name. Can she actually do that without my signature?" Jeff chuckled. "Absolutely not. Even if she attempted to sell it, no legitimate buyer would finalize the transaction without both owners' consent. Unless you sign something I don't know about, the house is still yours." His words were a balm to my bruised pride. Olivia had tried to pull the rug out from under me, but she'd miscalculated. That evening, I sat in my hotel room, replaying our phone call in my mind. I pictured Olivia's face as she delivered her announcement, so self-assured and dismissive, assuming she had all the power. She thought she had blindsided me, but she had no idea the safeguards I had put in place. This was my chance to reclaim control, not just of the house, but of my life. I poured myself a drink and stared out at the city skyline. The betrayal stung, yes, but it also brought a strange sense of clarity. The marriage I had fought so hard to sustain was gone, and with it, the weight of her manipulation. "All right," I said aloud, echoing my earlier response to her call. It wasn't just a word. It was a declaration. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and emails as I prepared for the fallout. I reached out to Jeff to ensure the legalities of the property were airtight. I spoke with my financial advisor to secure my assets and began drafting a plan for my return home. Olivia might think she had won, but she was about to learn the hard way that she had underestimated the man she had taken for granted. I wasn't angry, I was focused, and when the time came to face her, I would be ready. As I sat in my hotel room, nursing the remnants of my drink, memories of Olivia and me played like a slideshow in my mind. There was a time when I had been utterly captivated by her. She was magnetic, confident, ambitious, and full of life. I remembered our first meeting at a mutual friend's dinner party. She had walked in late, apologizing profusely, but charming everyone with her quick wit and easy laugh. We hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared love of travel and our dreams for the future. I was a young entrepreneur, just starting to make a name for myself in logistics. Olivia, fresh out of business school, was already climbing the corporate ladder. Her ambition was one of the things I admired most about her. In the early years, we were unstoppable. I worked tirelessly to build my company, while Olivia's sharp mind and charisma saw her rise quickly in her career. We supported each other's dreams, celebrated each other's wins, and shared the kind of partnership that felt unbreakable. But somewhere along the way, the cracks began to form. I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment things changed, but it was gradual, like the slow erosion of a shoreline. Olivia's late nights at the office became more frequent. The once lively conversations we shared turned into perfunctory exchanges about schedules and bills. Her ambition, which had once inspired me, began to feel like a wedge between us. She was always chasing the next promotion, the next big project, the next validation of her success. And I was always there, cheering her on, even as I felt myself being left behind. Then came Ethan Ford. I didn't think much of him at first. Olivia spoke about him occasionally. Her new boss, a dynamic leader who was shaking things up at her firm. She praised his vision, his leadership, and his ability to inspire the team. But as the months went on, his name started coming up more often. Ethan wants us to work late tonight, she'd say, brushing off our plans for dinner. Ethan thinks we should all attend the gala. It's great for team morale. At first, I chalked it up to professional admiration. Olivia had always been drawn to strong personalities, and Ethan seemed to fit the mold. But as time went on, I started noticing other signs. She became more secretive, guarding her phone and brushing off my questions with vague answers. She started spending money on things she never used to care about: designer clothes, expensive jewelry, trips to exclusive spas. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just being paranoid. After all, we'd been through so much together. I had been there for her during her toughest times, just as she had been there for me. But now, looking back, I could see it clearly. She had been pulling away for years, and I had been too blind, or too hopeful, to see it. As I sat in that hotel room, staring at the city lights, the weight of our shared history settled heavily on my shoulders. I had given so much to this marriage: time, energy, love, only to be discarded like an afterthought. But this wasn't just about me. It was about respect, about dignity, about not letting someone else dictate the terms of my life. I thought back to the sacrifices I had made for Olivia. When she decided to pursue her MBA, I was her biggest cheerleader, covering our expenses so she could focus on her studies. When she wanted to switch careers, I supported her, even though it meant uprooting our lives. And now, the same woman who once told me I was her rock had sold our house and moved on without a second thought. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a betrayal of everything we had built together. But as the bitterness threatened to take hold, I forced myself to take a step back. This wasn't just about what I had lost. It was about what I still had. I had a thriving business, financial stability, and a network of friends and colleagues who respected me. Most importantly, I had my integrity. Olivia might have chosen ambition over loyalty, but I wasn't going to let her actions define me. As the clock ticked past midnight, I closed my laptop and poured myself another drink. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but I was ready for them. Olivia had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. The morning sun filtered through the hotel blinds, but it did little to lighten the weight pressing on my chest. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone in my hand. Olivia's words from that call still echoed in my mind. "I've sold the house. You'll need to figure things out." It wasn't just the betrayal that stung. It was the casual dismissal of everything we had built together. Our home wasn't just a piece of property. It was a symbol of the life we had shared, the memories we had created, and the dreams we once had. For years, I had been the steady one, the anchor in our marriage. While Olivia chased her ambitions, I provided the foundation she needed to soar. And yet, it was clear now that my sacrifices had meant little to her. As I sat there, memories of our marriage played in my mind. The early years were filled with laughter and late-night talks, dreams of a future built together. I remembered the way Olivia's eyes lit up when we bought the house, the first major step in building our life. "This is ours," she had said, her voice full of wonder. "Our sanctuary." I had believed her. I had believed in us. But over time, her priorities shifted. The woman who once spoke of our sanctuary began to see it as a stepping stone, something to be leveraged for her own gain. The realization hit me like a freight train. Olivia wasn't the person I married anymore. The signs had been there for years, but I had chosen to ignore them, clinging to the hope that the woman I fell in love with was still in there somewhere. Her ambition, which I had once admired, had turned into a single-minded pursuit of success, no matter the cost. Her charm, which had drawn me in, now felt like a mask she wore to manipulate and control those around her. And Ethan, her boss, her lover, was just the latest in a series of betrayals that had eroded the foundation of our marriage. I stared at the empty coffee cup on the nightstand, the silence of the room amplifying the storm in my mind. For years, I had poured everything I had into our relationship, emotionally, financially, even spiritually. I had supported her dreams, even when it meant putting mine on hold. But what had I received in return? Lies, manipulation, betrayal. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was also liberating. For the first time in years, I saw the situation for what it truly was, a one-sided partnership where I had been used and discarded. As the hours ticked by, my anger began to transform into something else, resolve. Olivia thought she had taken everything from me, but she was wrong. She had underestimated me, assuming I would crumble under the weight of her betrayal. What she didn't realize was that I had been preparing for this moment long before she made that call. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Jeff's number. "Charles," he answered on the first ring. "What's going on?" "Jeff, I need you to double-check everything on the house," I said. "Title, ownership, the works. You've got nothing to worry about," he assured me. "The house is in your name, and there's no way she could have sold it legally without your consent." "That's what I needed to hear," I said, a faint smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. We discussed a few more details before I ended the call. With Jeff's confirmation, the pieces of my plan began to fall into place. I spent the rest of the day reflecting on the road ahead. Olivia's betrayal wasn't just a challenge, it was an opportunity. It was a chance to rebuild my life on my terms, free from her manipulation and deceit. As I made notes and sketched out ideas, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The anger and sadness were still there, but they were no longer in control. Instead, they had been replaced by a quiet determination to take back what was mine: my dignity, my freedom, and my future. By the time the sun set, I had a clear vision of what needed to be done. Olivia's call had shattered the illusion of our marriage, but it had also given me the clarity I needed to move forward. She thought she held all the cards, but she didn't realize that I had an ace up my sleeve. This wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the beginning of my next chapter. As I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, I whispered the words that had been running through my mind all day. This is my turning point. And for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. I sat in the hotel lobby, sipping a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The bustling energy of business travelers around me contrasted sharply with the stillness I felt inside. Olivia's betrayal no longer gnawed at me. It had settled into a strange sort of clarity. The life I thought I'd built was gone, and the woman I thought I knew had vanished long ago. But that didn't mean I was powerless. The past few days had been a whirlwind of preparation. With Jeff's confirmation that Olivia couldn't legally sell the house, I felt a newfound confidence. I wasn't just going to survive this storm. I was going to emerge stronger than ever. As I reviewed my plans, I couldn't help but reflect on how we'd reached this point. Olivia had always been ambitious, but I'd never seen her as ruthless. She used to light up at the thought of building a life together, but somewhere along the way, her priorities shifted. Now, her bold move to sell the house, our home, without so much as a discussion, spoke volumes about how far she had fallen. I picked up my phone and dialed Carter, my financial advisor. He answered on the second ring. "Charles," Carter said, "what's on your mind?" "I need you to run a full audit of everything connected to me and Olivia," I said. "Bank accounts, credit cards, investments, the works. I want to know where every dollar is and where it's going." "You got it," Carter replied. "Do you think she's hiding something?" "Not hiding," I said, my voice steady. "Taking." and I want to make sure she doesn't get another dime from me. Carter's reassurance was just another piece of the puzzle falling into place. I had already started transferring funds to accounts only I could access, and my assets were under lock and key. Olivia might have thought she could cut me out, but I had been preparing for this long before her dramatic call. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Olivia had underestimated how prepared I was, or maybe she simply didn't care. Either way, she was about to learn the hard way. Later that day, Jeff called with another update. I dug into the details, he said. Not only is the house legally yours, but any attempt she made to sell it was fraudulent. You've got all the leverage here, Charles. I allowed myself a small smile. Good. Let's make sure she knows it. Jeff laughed. Oh, she'll know. But tread carefully. People don't take well to losing control. Don't worry, I replied. I've got this under control. The next morning, I sat by the hotel window, watching the sun rise over the city. My coffee was warm this time, and for the first time in days, I felt something close to peace. Olivia had set the stage, but I was the one who would determine how the story ended. My mind was a whirlwind of plans. The financial protections, the legal steps, the careful timing of my return home. Every move was calculated, every detail planned. But what I wasn't prepared for was the strange sense of liberation I felt. This wasn't just about protecting what was mine. It was about reclaiming my life. For too long, I had let Olivia dictate the terms of our marriage. I had bent over backward to support her, to keep the peace, to hold on to something that had been slipping through my fingers for years. Now, I saw things clearly. Olivia's betrayal wasn't a loss. It was an opportunity to rebuild, to start fresh, to live on my terms. By the time my flight home was scheduled, I felt ready to face Olivia, to confront the lies, and to take back control. The calm before the storm had served its purpose. It had given me the clarity I needed to see through the chaos and focus on what mattered most: my dignity, my future, and my freedom. As the plane soared into the sky, I leaned back in my seat, a small smile playing on my lips. Olivia thought she had one, but she didn't realize the storm was coming, and I was the one bringing it. The drive home was strangely serene. The skies were clear, the roads open, and the playlist on my stereo felt like it had been chosen for a victorious homecoming. Yet, beneath the calm exterior, my mind was a battlefield. I knew what awaited me wasn't peace but confrontation, a reckoning for all that Olivia had done. As I turned onto our street, the sight of the house brought a bitter smile to my face. There it stood, pristine and unyielding, a symbol of everything she had tried to take from me. It wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was my sanctuary, my triumph. And soon, Olivia would realize that it was still mine. I parked in the driveway and stepped out, the sound of the car door slamming echoing in the quiet neighborhood. The air was crisp, and I took a moment to steady myself before walking to the door. When I entered, the house felt different. The energy was off. Furniture had been rearranged, a few decorations were missing, and there was an eerie silence. Olivia had tried to leave her mark even in her absence, as if to erase my presence. I chuckled to myself. She truly thought she had one. As I moved through the house, the front door suddenly opened, and there she was. Olivia walked in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, her expression morphing from surprise to irritation. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her tone sharp. "Funny," I replied, dropping my bag by the door. "I was about to ask you the same thing." She crossed her arms, her confidence radiating. "I thought I made it clear. The house is sold. You don't belong here anymore." I laughed, an honest, full-bodied laugh that seemed to catch her off guard. "What's so funny?" she snapped. "Olivia," I said, my voice calm but firm, "you can't sell something that doesn't belong to you." Her confident facade faltered for a moment. "What are you talking about?" "The papers were signed. The deal is done." "No," I said, stepping closer. "The papers were forged. The house is in my name, Olivia. Always has been. Whatever deal you made, it's null and void. This house was never yours to sell." The color drained from her face as the weight of my words sank in. She opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. Finally, she managed to stammer, You're lying. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder Jeff had prepared for me. Tossing it onto the coffee table, I said, "See for yourself." Olivia hesitated before picking up the folder. As she flipped through the documents, her expression shifted from disbelief to anger. "You had this planned all along," she accused, her voice trembling. I shrugged. "Let's just say I've been preparing for the inevitable." Her anger bubbled over, and she threw the folder onto the floor. "You think this makes you clever? You think this changes anything?" "It changes everything," I said, my tone unwavering. "You thought you could walk all over me, Olivia, that I'd just roll over and let you take everything I've worked for. But you were wrong." She glared at me, her confidence now replaced by desperation. "You don't understand. I had no choice." "You had plenty of choices," I interrupted, "and you made the wrong ones. Now you're going to live with the consequences." For a moment, we stood there in silence, the tension in the room almost suffocating. Then, Olivia let out a bitter laugh. "So what now, Charles? You think you've won? You think this little stunt makes you better than me?" I shook my head. "This isn't about winning, Olivia. It's about respect, something you lost for me a long time ago. And now, I've lost it for you." Her face twisted in anger, but she didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. As the sound of her car faded into the distance, I sat down on the couch, letting out a deep breath. The confrontation had been inevitable, and though it wasn't easy, it was necessary. Olivia had tried to take everything from me, but she had underestimated my resolve. The house, my dignity, my future, they were all intact, and I wasn't going to let her or anyone else take them from me again. I picked up my phone and called Jeff. "It's done," I said. "And how did she take it?" he asked. "Not well," I replied with a small laugh. "But she knows the truth now, and she knows she can't win." As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of peace. The battle was far from over, but the first victory was mine. The house was more than just a building. It was a symbol of everything I had worked for, everything I had fought to protect. And now, it was mine again, in every sense of the word. I leaned back on the couch, a small smile playing on my lips. Let the storm come. I was ready. The days following my return were a masterclass in watching Olivia unravel. She had always been composed, someone who thrived on being in control, but now that control was slipping through her fingers, and I was there to see it. The first sign of her desperation came the morning after our confrontation. I was sitting in the kitchen, sipping my coffee and enjoying the quiet. The house felt like mine again, as if its very walls recognized that the rightful owner had returned. Then the front door burst open. Olivia stormed in, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. She didn't bother to greet me, instead heading straight to the office. I followed casually, curious to see what her next move would be. She was rifling through the desk drawers, her movements frantic. "What are you looking for?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. She didn't even look up. "Documents. Something to prove you're lying about the house." I laughed softly. "Good luck with that. Everything's already been checked. Twice." She slammed the drawer shut and turned to face me, her eyes blazing. "This isn't over, Charles. You think you've won, but you haven't." Her defiance was almost admirable, but I could see the cracks forming. Olivia was a woman used to being in control, and now that she was losing her grip, she didn't know what to do. "Olivia," I said, my tone calm but firm, "it's over. The house is mine. The finances are locked down. You don't have a leg to stand on." She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "We'll see about that." What followed was a series of increasingly desperate attempts to regain control. Olivia began calling mutual friends, spinning tales of how I was being unreasonable and vindictive. She painted herself as the victim, hoping to rally sympathy. But her narrative didn't hold up for long. One by one, those friends reached out to me, curious about what was really going on. I explained everything calmly, providing the facts and letting them draw their own conclusions. The result was predictable. Olivia's web of lies began to unravel, and the support she had hoped to gain turned into quiet indifference. Then came her financial maneuvers. One afternoon, I received a call from Carter. "Charles," he said, his voice tense. "You're not going to believe this. Olivia tried to withdraw a significant amount from your joint account." "How much?" I asked. "Enough to be noticeable," he replied. "But don't worry. I've already frozen the account. She won't get a dime." I smiled, appreciating Carter's efficiency. "Thanks, Carter. Keep an eye on things, will you?" "You got it," he said. That evening, Olivia showed up at the house again. This time, she wasn't angry. She was pleading. "Charles," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard in years. "We don't have to do this. We can figure this out together." I raised an eyebrow, skeptical of her sudden change in tone. "Figure what out, exactly?" "The money," she said, stepping closer. "The house. Everything. We can find a way to make it work." I shook my head. "There's no we, Olivia. Not anymore." Her face fell, but I didn't let myself feel sorry for her. This was the woman who had tried to sell my home, steal my money, and walk away with everything I had worked for. Whatever regret she felt now was too little, too late. "Look," I said, keeping my tone even, "you made your choices, and now you're going to live with them." She stared at me, her expression a mix of anger and sadness. "You're really not going to give me anything?" "No," I said simply. "Not after what you've done." The power dynamic between us had shifted completely. For years, I had been the one trying to hold things together, bending over backward to make her happy. But now, the roles were reversed. Olivia was the one scrambling, grasping at straws while I stood firm. As she left that evening, her shoulders slumped and her confidence shattered. I felt a strange sense of closure. The woman who had once held so much power over me was now powerless, and I was finally free. Over the next few days, I focused on solidifying my position. I worked with Jeff to ensure every legal detail was airtight, consulted with Carter to protect my finances, and even started making plans for the future. Olivia had tried to destroy me, but instead, she had given me the opportunity to rebuild. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And as I stood in the quiet of my home, the weight of the past lifting from my shoulders, I realized something important. The power wasn't just in taking back what was mine. It was in knowing that I had never truly lost it. The days following Olivia's failed attempts to regain control felt like a long-awaited vindication. She had tried every trick in the book: manipulation, financial schemes, and even appeals to our mutual friends. But each move only deepened her descent. I spent most of my days calmly managing the chaos she left behind. With Carter and Jeff handling the finances and legal matters, I could focus on rebuilding the parts of my life she had tried to tear apart. But Olivia wasn't done. Not yet. It started with a text from one of our neighbors, Margaret, who had always been a little too interested in other people's lives. "Charles," her message read, "I saw Olivia at the coffee shop this morning. She was ranting about you to anyone who'd listen. Something about the house and the money? Are you okay?" I sighed, both annoyed and amused. Olivia's desperation had become a public spectacle. "Thanks for letting me know," I replied. "I've got it under control." And I did. That evening, I received another call, this time from Lisa, one of Olivia's closest friends. "Charles," Lisa began hesitantly, "I don't know if I should be telling you this, but Olivia's well, she's unraveling. She called me last night, crying about the house and how everything's falling apart. She's blaming you for everything." I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. "Blaming me? She's the one who tried to sell the house and drain our accounts." "I know," Lisa said quickly. "I just thought you should know. She's not in a good place, Charles." For a moment, I felt a pang of pity. Olivia was clearly struggling, and despite everything she had done, there was a part of me that hated to see her like this. But then I remembered the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, the sheer audacity of her actions. No, this was the bed she had made, and now she had to lie in it. The fallout wasn't just emotional for Olivia, it was financial too. With the joint accounts frozen and her attempts to access my assets thwarted, she was left scrambling to cover her expenses. Her lavish lifestyle, once fueled by my hard work, was now unsustainable. Carter confirmed it during one of our calls. "She's racked up a significant amount of debt," he explained. "Credit cards, personal loans, She's been living way beyond her means. Without your income to support her, it's all catching up. The irony wasn't lost on me. Olivia had always looked down on my blue-collar industry, but it was my work that had allowed her to maintain her image of success. The final blow came when I learned that Ethan, her so-called knight in shining armor, had abruptly ended things with her. Jeff called with the update. "Charles, you're going to love this." Apparently, Ethan got cold feet when Olivia's financial troubles became public. He's cut ties completely. I couldn't help but laugh. So much for her grand plan. Jeff chuckled. Karma has a funny way of working, doesn't it? As Olivia's world continued to crumble, I focused on moving forward. I made a point of reconnecting with friends and colleagues, people I had unintentionally distanced myself from during the turmoil of our marriage. Their support was overwhelming. "Charles, you're handling this with so much grace," Margaret said during one of our chats. "Most people would be out for blood." I smiled. "It's not about revenge, Margaret. It's about protecting what's mine and moving on." But Olivia didn't see it that way. One evening, as I was settling in with a book, my phone buzzed. It was a message from her. "We need to talk. Please, Charles." "I'm sorry." I stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. I had nothing left to say. The next day, Lisa called again, sounding more frantic this time. "Charles, I think Olivia might do something drastic. She's been talking about how she has nothing left, and it's honestly worrying me." "Lisa," I said firmly, "I appreciate your concern, but Olivia's choices are her own. I can't fix this for her." Lisa sighed. "I know. I just thought you should know." The fallout was a lesson in how quickly things could change. Olivia, who had once seemed untouchable, was now facing the consequences of her actions. And I, the man she had underestimated, was stronger than ever. As I stood in the kitchen that evening, sipping my coffee and watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Olivia's chaos was hers to deal with now. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my future, and I wasn't looking back. The sun dipped low on the horizon as I reviewed the stack of documents spread across my desk. Each piece of paper was a testament to Olivia's deceit. Bank statements, emails, and legal records that painted a vivid picture of her betrayal. Her attempts to siphon money, sell the house, and manipulate those around her were all laid bare. It wasn't enough to have stopped her schemes. I needed to make sure she couldn't twist the narrative to paint herself as the victim. The truth had to come out, and I was the only one who could ensure it did. The opportunity presented itself sooner than I expected. A mutual acquaintance, Lisa, reached out to me again, this time with a sense of urgency. "Charles," she began hesitantly, "I think you should know Olivia's been spreading some stories about you. She's telling people you froze her accounts out of spite and that you're trying to ruin her life." I sighed, the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "Let me guess. She's painting herself as the helpless victim?" Lisa hesitated before replying, "Pretty much. But honestly, I don't believe her. I've seen how she operates. I just thought you should be aware." That was all the push I needed. It was time to expose the lies. I began by compiling a dossier, a comprehensive record of everything Olivia had done. From the attempted sale of the house to the financial manipulation, every detail was backed by evidence. Emails she thought she deleted, screenshots of her communications, and receipts from her extravagant spending were all carefully organized. Carter and Jeff helped refine the narrative, ensuring every point was airtight. "This isn't about revenge," I reminded them. "It's about the truth. I won't let her rewrite history." Once the dossier was complete, I reached out to a select group of friends and acquaintances, people who had been caught in Olivia's web of lies. I invited them over for a casual dinner, framing it as a chance to clear the air and share my side of the story. The evening was tense at first, the air thick with curiosity and unease. But as I began to speak, laying out the facts with calm precision, the mood shifted. "I'm not here to ask for sympathy," I told them. "I'm here to set the record straight. Olivia has been spreading lies about me, and I think it's only fair that you know the truth." I presented the dossier, allowing the evidence to speak for itself. The emails where she discussed selling the house without my consent. The transactions that showed her attempts to drain our accounts. The text messages that hinted at her plans to move in with Ethan, long before she made the call to announce her departure. The room was silent as they absorbed the information. Some looked shocked, others embarrassed, as though they regretted believing her version of events. Margaret, the nosy neighbor, was the first to speak. "Charles, I had no idea. I'm so sorry for doubting you." Her words were echoed by others around the table, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of vindication. But the most satisfying moment came the next day when word of the dossier reached Olivia. She called me, her voice trembling with anger. "How dare you air our dirty laundry to everyone?" she hissed. I remained calm. "It's not dirty laundry, Olivia. It's the truth. If you didn't want people to know, maybe you shouldn't have done it." "You're trying to destroy me," she shouted. "No," I said evenly. "I'm making sure you can't destroy me." The fallout was swift. People who had once sided with Olivia began distancing themselves from her. Her carefully crafted image of the wronged wife crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Even Ethan, her lover, reportedly started questioning her motives, though I didn't care enough to find out for sure. What mattered was that the truth was out. The weeks that followed were quieter. I focused on myself, finding solace in small victories. Completing a new project at work, reconnecting with old friends, and rediscovering hobbies I had neglected during my marriage. Olivia, on the other hand, was left to deal with the mess she had created. Her attempts to rebuild her reputation were met with skepticism, and her social circle grew smaller by the day. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and ensuring that the truth prevailed. As I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The lies that had once defined my marriage were gone, replaced by clarity and freedom. Olivia had tried to rewrite the story, but I had taken the pen from her hand. And now, I was writing my own. The calm didn't last long. Olivia wasn't the type to go quietly, and her next move proved just how desperate she had become. It started with small, irritating provocations. Late-night calls from unknown numbers that hung up as soon as I answered. Cryptic messages like, "You won't win," sent from burner accounts. At first, I dismissed them as empty threats, the last gasps of a person losing control. But then she escalated. One evening, I was in the kitchen, finishing dinner and enjoying a quiet moment when the sound of shattering glass erupted from the living room. I ran to find the front window smashed, shards glinting on the floor. Standing on the other side was Olivia, flanked by none other than Ethan. My blood boiled, but I forced myself to remain calm. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded, stepping outside to face them. Olivia looked wild, her usual composed demeanor replaced by something feral. Ethan, on the other hand, wore a smug grin that only fueled my anger. "You think you can humiliate me and get away with it?" Olivia spat. "You think you can turn everyone against me?" "This is your doing, Olivia," I said coldly. "Every consequence you're facing is a result of your own actions." She stepped closer, her voice rising. "You're going to regret this, Charles. I'll make sure of it." Ethan chuckled, clearly enjoying the spectacle. "You should listen to her, man. She's not someone you want to mess with." I turned my gaze to him, my voice steady. "And you should leave before this gets worse for you. Trust me, you don't want to be part of what's coming next." Ethan's grin faltered, but Olivia grabbed his arm, dragging him toward the car. "This isn't over," she shouted as they sped away, leaving me to clean up the mess. The next morning, I called Jeff and Carter to discuss the incident. "She's spiraling," Jeff said, his tone serious. "This kind of behavior isn't just reckless, it's dangerous. You need to protect yourself." Carter chimed in. "We should consider filing a restraining order. If she's willing to escalate like this, there's no telling what she might do next." I agreed. It wasn't just about protecting my assets anymore. It was about ensuring my safety. The situation came to a head later that week. I was returning home from a meeting when I noticed a car parked across the street. It was Olivia's, but she wasn't alone. Ethan was with her, and they were watching the house. I pulled into the driveway and got out of the car, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. "Can I help you with something?" I called out, my voice carrying across the street. Ethan got out of the car, his posture aggressive. You've made this personal, man, and now we're here to settle it. I stood my ground, unflinching. You're not settling anything here. Turn around and leave before you make things worse. Before I could react, Ethan lunged at me, his fist swinging wildly. I stepped aside, narrowly avoiding the blow, and managed to push him away. Enough, I barked, my voice cutting through the tension. The commotion drew the attention of neighbors, several of whom stepped outside to see what was happening. Margaret, ever the nosy observer, quickly called the police. Ethan hesitated, realizing he was outnumbered, but Olivia egged him on. Don't back down now. Show him he can't get away with this. The sound of sirens cut through the air, and within minutes, the police arrived. Ethan and Olivia's bravado crumbled as officers separated us and took statements. He attacked me, I explained calmly, recounting the events. And this isn't the first time they've tried to intimidate me. Margaret corroborated my story, and with her statement and the evidence of the broken window from earlier, the officers had enough to act. Ethan was arrested for assault, while Olivia was left standing on the sidewalk, her confidence shattered. As the police drove away with Ethan in the back seat, Olivia turned to me, her face pale. You didn't have to do this, she said, her voice trembling. You did this to yourself, I replied. Every step of the way, you've chosen to escalate, and now you're paying the price. She said nothing, tears streaming down her face as she walked back to her car and drove away. That night, I sat in the living room, staring at the broken window, now temporarily boarded up. The confrontation had left me shaken but resolute. Olivia's attempts to intimidate me had failed, and her alliance with Ethan had only made things worse for her. I knew the fight wasn't over yet, but the scales were tipping in my favor. Olivia's desperation was her undoing, and I was ready for whatever came next. The storm had reached its peak, and I was still standing. The day of the court hearing arrived with a sense of inevitability. I had been preparing for this moment ever since Olivia's betrayal came to light, but seeing her and Ethan walk into the courtroom together was still surreal. She looked composed on the surface, but the tension in her movements betrayed her. Ethan, on the other hand, was visibly rattled, his usual smug demeanor replaced by a nervous rigidity. I sat quietly at my table, my lawyer, Jeff, beside me. He had been a rock throughout this ordeal, guiding me with his sharp legal mind and calm demeanor. Today, the truth would finally come to light, and Olivia and Ethan would face the consequences of their actions. The first part of the hearing focused on the assault. The prosecution presented the evidence, witness statements from neighbors, police reports, and even security footage from a nearby house that captured Ethan's attack. Ethan squirmed in his seat as the judge reviewed the footage. His lawyer tried to downplay the incident, arguing that it was a momentary lapse in judgment, but the evidence was damning. When it was my turn to testify, I recounted the events with precision, my voice steady and unwavering. I did everything I could to de-escalate the situation, I explained. But Ethan attacked me without provocation. I had no choice but to defend myself. The judge nodded, clearly unimpressed with Ethan's actions. Next came the financial aspect of the case. Jeff presented a detailed account of Olivia's attempts to sell the house and drain our joint accounts. The evidence was irrefutable, from forged documents to suspicious transactions. Olivia's lawyer tried to argue that she had acted out of desperation, but the facts painted a different picture. Her actions weren't those of a desperate woman. They were calculated moves to strip me of everything I had built. When it was Olivia's turn to speak, she faltered. The confident, composed woman I once knew was gone, replaced by someone struggling to hold herself together. I made mistakes, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I never meant for things to go this far. Her words rang hollow, a weak attempt to garner sympathy. The courtroom fell silent as I took the stand for my final statement. I turned to face the judge, my gaze unwavering. Your Honor, I began. This isn't just about property or money. It's about respect. For years, I supported Olivia, both emotionally and financially. I gave her everything I could, and in return, she betrayed me in the most profound way possible. She didn't just try to take my house. She tried to take my dignity. But I refused to let her. Today, I stand here not as a victim, but as someone who has reclaimed his life. All I ask is that justice be served, so no one else has to endure what I've been through." As I finished, the judge nodded, her expression thoughtful. She addressed Olivia and Ethan, her tone stern but fair. "Your actions, both individually and collectively, have caused significant harm. Betrayal, deceit, and violence have no place in our society, and you must be held accountable." She sentenced Ethan to probation and community service, along with mandatory anger management classes. Olivia was ordered to pay restitution for the damages she caused and was formally removed from any claim to the house or my assets. The weight of her actions was finally catching up to her, and for the first time, I saw genuine regret in her eyes. As the gavel struck, signaling the end of the hearing, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was over. The lies, the manipulation, the constant battle. It was all behind me now. Outside the courtroom, Olivia approached me, her eyes filled with tears. "Charles," she said softly, "I'm sorry. For everything." I looked at her, feeling no anger, no pity, just closure. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Olivia," I said simply before turning and walking away. The weeks that followed were transformative. I finalized the divorce, ensured my finances were secure, and focused on rebuilding my life. I moved into a new home, one filled with light and warmth, a stark contrast to the shadows of my past. I reconnected with old friends, found joy in the simple things, and even began exploring new opportunities in my career. Most importantly, I found peace. One evening, as I stood on my balcony, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, I reflected on everything I had been through. The betrayal had been painful, but it had also been a catalyst, a wake-up call that forced me to take control of my life. Olivia and Ethan were a chapter one had closed, and now I was writing a new one. A chapter filled with resilience, freedom, and the promise of a brighter future.